Hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Sound Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Couch. My business partner, Paul Shelton, is the man behind the camera, and we've got a fantastic guest for you today. Her name is Nancy Spring. We talked to Nancy about her life, her parents, and if you are in any way sensitive to sort of heavy subjects, this might not be the one for you. But if you don't mind that sort of thing and you're interested in what makes a sweet and interesting, loving person the person they are, this is a great one. We've talked to Nancy before. She was my old neighbor and a friend, and we've had her in to talk about her nursing career. You can see that on social media, on Facebook and Instagram at My Sound Legacy, and you can find out more about what we're doing at mysoundlegacy.com. I'm not going to tell you too much more because Nancy's a great storyteller, and we were very lucky to get her to sit down with us while she did. So, without any further ado, here's our conversation with Nancy Spring. Thank you, Nancy Spring. Very charmed to be in your lovely house. I love coming here. And thanks for the fire and everything, and the pastries this morning.
Yeah.
I've kind of always wanted to sit with you and ask you a bunch of questions. So now's my chance. But I wanted to first talk about the crazy response that we've seen from having you on an Instagram reel. I'll give a real quick context. We sat with you for about an hour and then made this video. It was maybe 9-12 minutes long. And then from that, we condensed just a little vignette, a little story of you talking about your nursing career. And we thought, people would like it and then we'd share it with nurses. And 630,000 views later.
I can't count that high.
What's that been like for you to get that response? I mean, never mind just the views, but the commentary and all that.
Okay. First of all, it was really meaningful to have you guys ask me to do it. That's not a story that often gets told or asked for. And given that it's been such a long career for me, then it comes out and all the comments are so positive and so loving. It's on social media. None of them are weird. None of them are, somebody haranguing over healthcare, and most of the comments are from nurses, and they are agreeing with me.
Yeah.
About what an incredible profession it is.
Yeah.
And people will say, my mother was a nurse, my grandmother, my daughter. And then it gets into the hospice. Mm-hmm. People talking about death and dying. Hospice chaplains have commented.
Yeah.
A lot of hospice nurses.
Yeah.
Saying that it's an incredible honor to be with someone dying, which I agree.
I agree. So
it's been amazing. The numbers are something else, but the comments, they've been from the heart.
From the heart, overwhelmingly positive and affirming. I mean, people saying like, that's why I'm a nurse. This is why I do this thing. It's great to hear it. And people keep commenting like, you're still working. That's the thing I think that really grabs people is that you've not retired from it because you love it.
And it's so diverse. Mm-hmm. It offers.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't be lifting patients on a bedpan anymore.
Right.
Although I just did with my...
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's diverse. It allows you to stay if you want to stay in it.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that didn't make it into the reel. I mean, you're talking about hospice in almost not an abstract way, but it as a work, but you literally just were hospice and had hospice in your home, but also gave hospice care to your husband of how long were you guys married?
50 years.
50 years. And he passed away how long ago?
Last April.
Last April.
We're coming up on a year.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do that. Yeah. I always wanted, that's the nurse in me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, a gift, an amazing gift to be. I'm like, I know I've told you I was raised by a hospice nurse. I've a grandmother, mom, and a wife who are all nurses. Mm-hmm. So it was very meaningful to me to get to have that conversation with you about you as a person and just the profession in general, and to see your story reflected was kind of me hearing a bit of my mom's story,
Yeah.
which was really nice.
Yeah, and I look forward to meeting her.
Yeah, she also very much wants to meet you. She saw that and was like, "Oh my God, we're gonna have so much to talk about."
Yeah.
But this is all a preamble, a way of saying what people normally want to talk to you about is not your nursing career. They
Right.
always want to know about your dad. You said that to me when I said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something." You thought for sure I wanted to talk to you about your dad. I didn't know anything about your dad, and his story is obviously incredible. So the fact that we're sitting here talking about it now it's your fault this time that somebody wants to talk to you about your dad because you brought
All
it up.
right. Okay. Guilty.
Guilty.
Guilty as charged.
But now I'm dying to know because it's we know a little bit about it, and what you've shared so far is, I mean, frankly, incredible. So if you don't mind, tell me about your old man.
I'll tell it, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to tell it.
Yeah.
So it's the story of Gerald Russell Stablein, Jerry, my dad, Daddy. And it is a war story. It's World War II and Korea. Told by me at 80 now, his daughter. It's also an anti-war story. And then personally, it's the story of war coming home and, causing destruction and havoc on loved ones. It's also the story of history. It's the story of how history descends on us, envelops us, demands, and how history in the making affects one single person after one single person after one single person, and how history forms us and we form it. It's my dad, by any lens that you would look at him, was a war hero. He had many medals, citations, etc. So it's a story of a war hero, his story that I'm going to tell you, but it's also a story of amazing sorrow. It's a tragic story. It's not a comedy. It does have inspiration to it, but more than that, it's a story of tragedy. All right, so he was a baby. He was 13 pounds.
13.
13 pounds. He was born
Oh my gosh.
April 30th, 1916, to immigrant parents who had fled Bavaria, Germany, because of religious persecution, and they had come across in covered wagons to the middle of our country, South Dakota, Aberdeen, South Dakota. He set up a tailor shop. She proceeded to have 9 children. And they had a little plot of land. It's that glacial, fertile prairie. And they were doing pretty well. And then his dad, my dad, by the way, was the 8th of the 9 children. So his dad had cancer of the stomach and had a goat stomach put in by the Mayo Clinic, which was operating then, way back then. And one day my dad came home. He had his lunch at school, but he was a big boy. They were all big. The women were all over 6 feet. Wow. The men he was 6'4", but not at 8 years of age. But he was a big boy. He was hungry. He knew there was homemade bread on the counter, that his sister had just churned the butter, and that, across the counter were all the preserves that got canned, with the sun shining through. He heard a shot. No one else was home. He went up the stairs and he found his dad, all over the room. Man. It plummeted the family into poverty. The Depression was coming in like a freight train, but they went into it earlier than the 30s. He was at the age of 8 on the streets, and it's cold in Aberdeen, South Dakota, selling newspapers every day, picking coal off the railroad tracks for heat. His mom took him boarders, and then he was 6'4", 220 in high school, handsome as heck. That doesn't matter. He was a football player, and he went to South Dakota State on a football scholarship. And there he met my mom, Icelandic heritage. She was super smart, shy, beautiful, voted most beautiful at South Dakota State. And they fell in love. He was in NROTC, and it's the end of the 30s now. He goes to Pensacola, flight training. He comes back with his Navy wings shining. They get married in South Dakota, October 30th, 1941, and go to San Diego. 6 weeks later, they hear on the radio, just like everybody, that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and he left within hours. And, looking back on it, that was the end of him. That was the end of this real funny, gregarious, joking, generous guy. So he goes. He gets on the aircraft carrier, the Yorktown, goes to the Battle of the Battle of the Coral Sea, which is April of 42. That's north of Australia. And he's a torpedo bomber. Those are the big, heavy, slow planes with one big bomb on it. The Battle of the Coral Sea for the United States was not a win. We never could find them, the Japanese. And this was one story he told. He didn't tell many stories, but they couldn't find anybody. So they each dropped their load. And coming back, the Yorktown was blacked out. They were running out of gas. A lot of the men landed in the water. Many were killed. My dad landed on the carrier, and when he got out, climbed out of the cockpit, his size 14 shoes were filled with water, sweat from stress.
Gosh.
Then from there, the Yorktown goes to Midway, which is a small little island in the middle of nowhere. And they barely arrive. The United States cracks the code. So we know the fleet is there. The Japanese fleet is there. And on June 3rd or 4th, the clouds lift, and one of our fighter planes sees the entire fleet. And all hell breaks loose. My dad wasn't in the first group that went out from Torpedo Squadron 3. I don't think any of them came back. But he was certainly going out after that. And, I said it's a heavy, big, lumbering, I think it's called the Douglas Devastator, coming in really low on those Japanese aircraft carriers. You can see the whites of the enemy's eyes. And then they look for the smokestack to drop the torpedo in. Then, that day, he is back on the Yorktown carrier. The Japanese bomb it. It doesn't sink for 2 or 3 more days, but my dad's in the water with all these body parts. He's already been in all this combat that day. All these body parts and blood and oil slick, hours. And then He's rescued. He goes to 3 more aircraft carriers, the Enterprise, the Hornet, the Saratoga. The Saratoga and the Hornet are bombed out from underneath him too, and he's in the water again. In 6 weeks, all of that happens.
Wow.
Okay, now, here's a story from my mom. So the Navy then gives these guys R&R, and they come back. There's a hotel for them. And my mom comes, you know, her mother probably sewed her a new outfit. She's got her suitcase with homemade cookies, photos, and negligee. And she told me this story years later. He broke up every mirror in that room, hotel room. There were shards of glass all over. They never made love. She threw the cookies in the wastepaper basket. And now we know, well, that's classic PTSD. Mm-hmm. The Navy nobody had that word for it. That came with Vietnam. Yeah. And then the next thing that happens is the Navy sends him to Patuxent River, Maryland, to be a test pilot. And that's where I'm born. I've got my locket on here with my baby picture in it. At any rate, that's where I'm born, in a little cottage on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay. My dad's home, you know, his major in college was animal husbandry. He was cut out to be a South Dakota farm boy with chickens and a couple of pigs and a couple of cows. He's got chickens there, and he's a test pilot. And I think I'm like 7 months old. He spins the groove. You know, that's when the plane goes out of control and spins down. His gunner is killed, and he's in the water again. Oh my God. He's rescued. He's broken his back. And I know that, you know, I always knew my dad as having a scar all the way down here and a scar here. And the cockpit went through his legs, the controls. So he had holes through his calves that had putty in them or something, and they would ooze from time to time. He broke his back. He was in the hospital for a year. My God. He's still in the Navy. Then they send him to Pensacola. They send him to Oakland. They send him to Monterey to grad school.
Wow.
And then we're in another war. And now this time he goes to Guam as the exec of the squadron. And we come, now there's 3 daughters. I'm the oldest. My mom and the 3 of us come, and we're on Guam for 2 years. He's flying, the squadron is flying bombing missions from Guam to Korea and back. And he's losing it. He's on the loudspeaker to his pilots. You know, he's thinking they don't have it together. He's yelling at them and swearing at them. And he's court-martialed for behavior unbecoming an officer. Now, within 2 days of the trial, he is on a hospital airplane from Guam to Oakland. Thank God the Navy saw that. He was acquitted, basically, yeah, and deemed what he was.
Psychologically unfit.
Psychologically
right.
Traumatized beyond belief. Then we come later on another plane. He's in Oak Knoll Naval Hospital Psych for almost a year. He's painting by numbers. He's making ceramics. He builds a boat. The Navy retires him after 18 years. They don't make him wait for 20. They bump him up to commander, and he's out of the Navy. And therein ensue, we go back to Aberdeen, South Dakota, but therein ensues some pretty heavy family stuff. And he moves us to Florida. He's having a hard time making it financially. We moved to Florida, and he has a heart attack, and he dies. And he has he dies 6 months after John Kennedy. And he has the exact same funeral, which we all remember, it was televised, Kennedy's funeral, at Arlington National Cemetery. You know, he has caissons, the horses pulling, the flag-draped coffin, the planes overhead with one missing, the guns, the salute, the taps on the bugle, the flag folded up. We're sorry for your loss. We are grateful for his service. And we gave little talks about him, you know. But nobody ever said, and this is our metaphor, that he brought back from the war a sea bag full of venomous snakes.
Sea bag full of venomous snakes.
Because, you know, the Navy, they always carry a sea bag.
Yeah.
And he has had all these, it's a metaphor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
right.
Ghosts. I mean, the horror of that.
And I've gone through many stages in understanding him. And this is why it's an anti-war story. You know, I'm just going to say, rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
My dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, how did your mom ever come to an understanding of what was going on with him? Did she?
Ooh, I don't know. You know, he was really hard. He was physically, you know, she had a lot of black eyes and etc. I don't think so. I think they were scrambling all the time.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think she ever did. Her main thing was she was trying to raise us.
Yeah.
She started drinking, and, you know, she had a couple of severe nervous breakdowns herself. But her main thing was, I think, to tell you the truth, he let us down. He let her down.
Yeah.
One time we were in a restaurant. This was after I was married to Mike, before Joe was born. And she was kind of a loose cannon then. We were in a Chinese restaurant. We're talking about Dad, and we're deifying him again. And she yells out real loud, "Your father was no success." And I went, "Oh, Mom's losing it right now." But the truth of the matter is, he really had a hard time. You know, we plummeted into poverty.
Yeah.
His family plummeted into it. So did my family.
Right.
So my mom is another big, huge story of sorrow for me. And both of them really affected by the war, and us too, but them, they were like in the eye of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it came home into your house. The war just never stopped. And that, I mean, it's not an uncommon story that an extremely nurturing and caring and giving person would come from that environment. You know, that pressure cooker of war in the home could make someone who took an interest in psychology and
right.
You know, that sort of thing. So can you talk about how you were influenced by that and what that did to your desire to be a caregiver?
Yeah, I think that being firstborn, they were pretty much a wreck when I was born, but they got worse. So I got the best of them. I think I came into this world with some strength. And I was smart. And school really was my place. And I was taking care of my sisters. I was making the meals. But I was headed out. I was headed to college. I was headed someplace. And every teacher told me that, and I knew it. And my parents were both college educated. So there was that value in our home, luckily, too. So you just take the combination of all of them and my personality type or whatever, and then these little angels that came along in the form of teachers or scholarship, people that said, apply to this scholarship, whatever, Girl Scouts, all of that. And then it was by the luck of the draw that it was a nursing scholarship that I won.
Yeah, how did that work? How did you get a nursing specific scholarship? I don't know how those.
My dad moved us my senior year of high school away from all my friends, extended family who were caregivers of us. We go down to Florida. It's a mess down there. We're really in trouble down there. I'm going to high school. It's Fort Lauderdale. Hot rods. Where the boys are. I've got one skirt and one blouse that I wear every day to school. I wash it out and iron it. I'm a nobody there. But this guidance counselor, I'm in there reading the college catalogs. She took an eye on me. And she said, Nancy, she doesn't really know me. I'm not, I've just arrived. She said, look at this. Look at your grades here and stuff. I think you should apply. Take this exam. So there was a real angel.
Yeah. She saw a path for you and saw something specific in you that recommended you for that type of work.
And I had an aunt that had been a nurse, a public health nurse, all over the state of South Dakota.
Wow.
She had a rifle in her car, and sometimes she'd come home with an elk that she'd shot in her. I loved her.
Wow.
And so I had her in my family tree.
What was her name?
Mary Johnson.
Aunt Mary Johnson. Do you have any good stories about her?
She was incredible. I loved her, yes. She would always show up unannounced. She never confronted her brother, who she pretty much raised and loved. She never confronted them or anything, but she'd show up. Woo! Anybody home? And she'd come in, take her coat off. She was 6'1", huge woman, and just set about doing whatever. She's the one that taught me to drive.
Really?
Oh yeah,
wow.
She was a good one.
Yeah, she sounds cool.
She was a good one. So I had her in my background in terms of nursing, and nursing seemed just perfect for me.
Yeah.
And then when I got to grad school, they only had psych and midwifery, and I picked psych. Well, duh.
Yeah. You'd been doing it for years, observing
we had
that.
a bit of mental illness going on in my family.
Well, it's interesting. I'm just hearing you tell your story. The combination of toughness. I mean, there's a lot of toughness in your grandpa had a goat stomach. That's a detail that we didn't really get to.
Right.
That's amazing. But there's clearly that Midwestern hardy
And you know
stock.
what? It's South Dakota. It's
just Western.
It's right there, the prairie.
Yeah.
The farming. They were
Hardy.
They came, we don't need to get into this, the land was stolen, but at any rate, they farmed it.
Yeah.
And they were by nature, they loved people because they were lonely, and they were hardy.
Yeah.
And they didn't let anything stop them.
Well,
and see, I do have that blood coursing through me.
You do.
You got it.
You do, because you've got that toughness, but the nurturing thing, which is it's its own. It's great to see that they obviously can be combined well
Yeah.
in a person.
I think they feed off of each other,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I guess you do have to have a certain mental toughness to continue to be compassionate and empathetic to people who are in a bad position, which that was your career. I mean, we've talked a little bit about your nursing career. Obviously, you're a huge hit now with your nursing career. You're a big star. But
Who would have thought a nurse would be a
I
big
know. But if we could circle back to that, if you don't mind, just in relation to your dad, still, and
Yeah.
and the sort of, I don't know, psychic weight that put on your family. Did you, when you were learning the craft and learning the vocabulary of all the things you learned in psych, were you recognizing like, oh wow, I've been seeing that my whole life? Were you connecting the dots?
I was starting to connect the dots.
Mhm.
The trauma was pretty wide and deep, so it's taken me years. I think I was in my 40s before I said out loud that he was an alcoholic.
Really?
Yes, it took me a long.
Wow.
I was 33, driving over the Golden Gate Bridge before I ever cried, and I had to pull over for myself. I had cried for them,
Right.
my sisters, my mom and dad. And the thing that made me cry was going to a new school, because, we went to new schools all the time.
Right.
And I showed up in pedal pushers, and it was against the dress code. You're supposed to wear a dress. And I was mortified. And that's what made me cry. That was the first entree in.
Wow.
So it took me a while. But I knew, but when I was in psych in grad school, oh man, it all
Blew
felt
your mind.
really familiar.
Yeah.
Real familiar.
I can imagine.
And I knew how to enter the world,
Mhm.
enter into people that were having
In the middle
a
of it.
lot of that suffering,
Wow.
because I'd lived with them all.
Right. Yeah, you had more than one archetype of trauma and dysfunction. And
My
that sort of thing.
sisters were, yes, all of them, all of them had a heavy dose of what we would call now mental illness. But back then we just called it, oh boy, she's not in a good place today.
Right. Not in a good place. Well, the vocabulary has shifted a
Yes,
little.
it's really shifted.
I find it really interesting the way you navigated it, because like you said, you were kind of born at a happier time in your parents' partnership.
I was born right before D-Day. So if you take me born in the middle of the war, hey, I came right at a big uplift. That's
Yeah.
one poetical
Right.
thing to say.
Born in a moment of hope.
Yeah, born in the moment of
It's just
hope.
you've got children. You've sat with that, the early imprint of a kid, those first couple of years of your life. You'd think, well, God, it can't talk. It doesn't know what we're saying. But that really is an indelible mark on a person, those first couple of years. I mean,
Definitely.
the way that you came up, how did that influence how you treated your family?
Well, first of all, I really wanted a family. I knew that. And I may not have known that I wanted to have another crack at having a good family, even if I might be the mother and not the daughter or the child.
Yeah.
And, I was 25 when I had Shannon, and I was 40 when I had Joe. And then I had stepchildren, and also my teenage sister had come to live with me when my mom had her nervous breakdown. I'd had lots of opportunities to learn it because I felt with Shannon I was shooting in the dark here in terms of being a mother. So let's see, what was your question?
Well, just knowing how you came up and seeing, you learn a lot what not to do.
Right. Oh boy, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. This is what I say about both my mom and my dad. They were incredible teachers. They taught me what not to do. They showed me the pitfalls, and I was watching, and I knew that. I knew I wasn't going to get into alcohol. I was not going to marry a man that was into alcohol and unfaithful like my dad was. I got that straightened out when I was a young teen.
Wow.
And I knew with my mom, I wasn't going to get into alcohol like she did. They just taught me a lot by example, what not to do, and some things that, of course, that I loved about them.
Yeah.
I watched my mom advocate for us,
Did you get to see the brightness of your dad very much at all? Like, because I know you said he was gregarious and funny up to a point. Did you ever get flashes of it?
Not really.
Wow.
That's one of the things that I've owned up to. Not really. I took care of him. I was always bringing him a beer, ironing his shirts, cutting his toenails. I got early on the idea that he was in trouble. He was weak. I couldn't lean on him. That I got right away.
Wow.
And I wasn't so much scared of him as I was knowing that he was not firing on all cylinders.
Were you sad for your parents as a young person?
I think it was so chaotic,
Yeah.
so crisis-oriented that later, but as a child, man, we were shoveling it all the time. Trying to do my homework under the covers with the flashlight, trying to figure out what we're going to eat, trying to get to school. That's where we were at.
Yeah. He never got to see you as a nurse.
No.
Right? He died when you were...
But you want to know something? I was home from college briefly. I was supposed to be home only 3 days. And he had a diner. They had a diner now that they were living in.
Yeah.
And there was a note that said, illness in the family. So I figured it out and went over to the hospital. He had a heart attack. And while I'm there, he's got to get out of there, AMA. He's got to get out of there. He's got to get down to Homestead to the Air Force hospital there where they'll take care of him and pay for him. So he talks me into driving him down there. It's like an hour and a half. I thought he was going to die in the car.
Oh, my God.
And he's white as a ghost, sweating. He gets up there, he gets into the bed, and his last words to me were, he knows I'm at the University of Florida in nursing. He says, "Don't ever become a Navy nurse." And I've thought about that so many times. And you know what? I think it was. I think he had crushes or something or others with Navy nurses and felt like, well, that isn't what I want for you.
Yeah.
They lead a certain kind of life.
Mm.
And then the next morning, I'm about to take the Greyhound bus and go back to the University of Florida up in Gainesville. I'm just about to leave. My sisters are in school and my mom's at work. The phone rings, and it's Homestead Hospital, and they said, "He's taken a turn for the worse. We need you to come." And he had already died, but we didn't know that. So I went to 3 different schools, picked my mom up, and we drove down. We saw him. He had a myocardial infarction.
Wow.
We saw him. My mother completely falls apart.
Yeah.
And then we drive back, an hour and a half back, with my 8-year-old sister going, I know everybody's sad, but can you all stop crying? I'm driving, of course.
Mm-hmm. Did your dad, did he know he was dying? Did he express any of that? Like, I think I'm going to die. I might not make it? Or
No.
he just been through so much, he thought, I'll be fine.
Yeah. Here's another story about him. He's 300 pounds now.
Whoa.
They didn't have enough to eat as a kid.
Right.
He loves food.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't have any money, and he's always making these menus, how we can stretch, a pound of hamburger. We're going to have hash on Tuesday, and we're going to have this on that day. This is as things are really getting bad when I'm a senior in high school. It's his birthday in the hospital. We all come with a lemon meringue pie that my mom has made. It's his favorite. He eats the entire pie in front of us in one fell swoop. He's not supposed to, he's had a heart attack.
Right.
I don't think he knew he was dying.
Yeah.
Honest to God, he had how many near-death experiences?
Yeah, I'd been so close, so many times.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he felt death coming for him or pulling him along. I just think he was, again, how am I going to eat? Who's going to pay for this?
Right. But the idea of him and your mom and the war and all of it as a teacher, I think is a really good lesson to take away from all of it. You said that earlier to me, you're like, I don't think any of these wars are worth it. It's just it's a simple statement, but it's like profound and something that, it's a great lesson to take away. Like the war's not worth it. In the house, overseas, you know.
I got one more story that just popped into my mind.
Please tell it. Yeah.
All right, so he's died now. My mother's trying to keep it together. She's got other kids.
Mm-hmm.
Namely, Amy, who's little, 8. She's teaching now, and they're integrating the schools, and she's new into teaching. At any rate, she's primarily an English teacher and typing and shorthand, but they've got her teaching history in middle school. And this one day, she says, she has a nervous breakdown in the classroom. She says, the Japanese are coming. They're coming right now. Get under your desks. The kids are laughing at her. She's under her desk. They come, they take her, and they take my sister. Yeah. And she ultimately winds up in the state mental hospital in the swamps of Florida.
And where'd your sister end up?
She went to me.
Wow.
She came to live with me. Now she's older. She's like, she's 13 now. A few years have passed since he's died.
So you're 22?
Yes.
And you're suddenly...
I'm teaching now. I'm a little bit older than that because I've had Shannon. I'm like 26 or 7.
Wow.
But yeah.
And then,
so there again, the war.
Yeah. All those years later, still wreaking havoc.
Yeah. Freaking her out.
Wow. And when did your mom pass?
She passed a month after Joe was born.
Wow.
So that would have been 1984.
What did she think about your nursing career? Did she?
She loved it.
She loved it?
My mom and dad were always proud of me. See, I had that.
That's nice.
I had their love, and I had their, I think, they looked to us kids, but especially to me, oh, she's bringing legitimacy to us.
She's doing all right. Yeah.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
Mom was proud of me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little less than half your age, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm very proud of you. I'm proud to be your friend. Proud to hear your story.
Thank you.
I think, obviously, I really love nurses, but I love anybody who's a caregiver, just a caring person who can have empathy for others. And you learned it probably the hardest way that a person can learn, by having to learn what not to do. But you did good. You're still doing good. You're still seeing patients.
Yeah.
Still people who know and love you. Like we were here the other night, and you got a call from a patient.
I did, didn't I?
In the night. Like, wow, this lady doesn't stop. It's pretty great. I really appreciate you sharing your story about your dad, and I know it's an important family story. It's part of your family's legacy and the thing that made you guys. I mean, the ancestors coming here, the covered wagon, the goat stomach, all of it,
Yeah.
the tragedy. But, I know you were framing the story of your dad as a tragedy, and it certainly is terribly tragic, but you are anything other than a tragedy. And your mom and your dad made you. So there's that.
They're totally.
And all the people you've
Totally.
helped, and your awesome kids and your beautiful grandkids. So there's light in that
Totally.
dark tale, which I
I've
appreciate.
had my story is a story. What is that story? It's not a comedy. It's not a tragedy. It's a happy. It's a happy story.
And it's a real story, because it's not just like all bliss all the time. It's not been all sorrow all the time. You've navigated the waters. Keep going. Yeah. You've kept going.
Yeah.
And you've kept a really positive attitude, which is it's beautiful. And
Thanks, Andrew.
yeah, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you.
Absolutely.